Oops, they did again. Starship Flight 9 took to space and did not finish all of its goals. Let's talk about that. Hello everybody and welcome! On Tuesday, May 27th, SpaceX launched their massive Starship and Heavy booster vehicle into space. This was Flight 9 in the test campaign for that massively gigantic stainless steel rocket ship that is designed to be fully reusable, booster and second stage. And speaking of the booster, this was the first time that they reflew an already returned booster. So this booster was caught in a previous flight and was now reflown, and SpaceX pushed it to the brink of its capability, which resulted in the booster exploding upon return. But that was sort of to be expected, so congratulations to SpaceX on finishing the booster side of the mission. Unfortunately, Starship did not succeed in relighting its engines in orbit and coming to a controlled descent, which is doubly disappointing because SpaceX CEO Elon Musk said in an interview that one of the main goals for this mission was to test out the new heat tiles that they put on the Starship. They not only put on different heat tiles, but also different ways of attaching them, different compounds that they try to fill the gaps, etc. But since the ship started tumbling while in orbit and did not re-enter in the desired trajectory, I am not sure how much valid data the engineers are going to get from this, despite SpaceX of course claiming that they got a lot to work with now. This was the third time that a so-called Block 2 variant of the Starship was flown. The first one launched with the 7th test flight and the second with the 8th test flight, both of which had a lot of problems during the ascent phase of the launch. And one of them, well, broke up very spectacularly over the Caribbean. This time with Flight 9, the ship at least got out of the atmosphere and into space, at least on a suborbital trajectory, but the goal of landing it in the Indian Ocean, like they did with previous flights of Block 1, was not fulfilled. Apparently this was now a new failure mode, so maybe what Elon Musk said in that interview I mentioned earlier, that they have solved 80% of the engine bay troubles, was kind of true because they went further than they did with the previous flights, but there were some new issues that arose, including some sort of jet that was visible in the engine bay that came out. They claimed there were some leaks somewhere, but we're not sure if that jet was part of that leak. I have no idea, unfortunately, and they haven't told us yet. They are still analyzing, of course, what has happened. Another thing that they wanted to do and didn't manage to do was to deploy some Starlink dummy satellites out of the payload bay door. Unfortunately, the door did not open. Maybe this was due to the ship tumbling or there was something frozen. I don't know. Unfortunately, we're still having to wait for the analysis on that. But you can see stuff tumbling around inside the payload bay, some particles flying around there, showing us that the ship was indeed not in a very good attitude at this moment. So what does this all mean for the future of the program? Honestly, this really depends on which camp you land nowadays, because the development of Starship has become really polarized depending on what you think about the person of the CEO of SpaceX. If we look at what the booster was able to do, that's definitely a win for the company. They have shown that they can refly the super heavy booster and they pushed its boundaries beyond what was so far capable. So there's going to be some good data there for future booster flights to see how much they can push the envelope. Regarding Starship itself, this is a bit more difficult. Elon Musk himself said in the interview with Ars Technica that they really wait for the Raptor 3 variant to really solve a lot of the problems that they currently have. The question is, why then do they still try to launch the vehicle if they expect it to fail? And the answer is that they also want to test other parts of the system that they cannot test on the ground, for instance the heat tiles. Of course, there are like baking chambers where you can push heat tiles to the limit, but it's still a different thing when you push a 100-ton spaceship out of the atmosphere and then watch it re-enter. One thing that was new was the new user interface or the new diagrams on the stream of SpaceX, which was once again on the platform formerly known as Twitter exclusively. I'm not a huge fan of what they did there because there is less information now, in my opinion. For instance, you see a gauge for the entire propellant, but no longer a separate gauge for liquid oxygen and methane. So maybe they will change that back in the future, I don't know. I'm not really happy with what they did there. If you really want a detailed and engineering-focused play-by-play of the launch, you should check out Scott Manley's video on that, or you probably have because he has way more subscribers than I have. But one thing that he said made me curious because he said, well, SpaceX is a private company and this is not taxpayer funded. Am I wrong, or was SpaceX awarded a couple of $1 billion for developing the human landing system for the Artemis missions, and that is basically what they're trying to do here, meaning proving that they can relight Starship in orbit and control its re-entry and control its descent, which of course will be necessary when landing on the moon. What's also going to be necessary is going to test the refueling operations, which have not been attempted so far anywhere yet. If you don't know, in order to get to the moon with Starship, or with the lunar variant of Starship, the lunar variant of Starship would have to be refueled in orbit by a tanker, and then would head to an orbit around the moon, get the crew on board, which would be delivered there by the Orion capsule, and then land on the moon and get the crew back up to the surface. So what they need to demonstrate for HLS to work is they can refuel it in orbit, they then can fly it to the moon, they then can relight the engine again to get down to the surface, land it safely and return safely to orbit, once again relighting the engines multiple times. So there's still a lot of milestones to complete before we can say, alright, we are now confident that we can send a crew to the moon without, well, killing them. There are a lot of things that Elon Musk says and does that I wholeheartedly disagree with, but where I agree with him is that he says we need a sort of transportation system for space. Building the infrastructure, building the roads for space transportation to get to, well, he's infatuated with Mars, but there's a lot of other planets and moons in the solar system that are very interesting to get to and to explore. But having a transportation infrastructure in place is key before we are able to do anything out there reliably. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? Was this flight a success? Was it a failure? Get to those keyboards and type out your thoughts. I am sure, as I said before, depending on where you land on the spectrum of Elon love or Elon hate, or maybe a more measured approach, that people will call this flight an utter failure or a great success. Anyway, to keep this channel successful, I hope you're interested in these types of videos, and if you are, maybe you hit that subscribe button, or if you really want to support me, you can do that over on Patreon or by becoming a YouTube member. And if you want to tell me how much of an idiot I am, you can do so over on my Discord server. Link to that is down there in the description, or you can, as I said, use the comments. Me, I don't want to see a specific company succeed or fail, I just want to see humanity expand in our solar system and maybe one day into interstellar space rather. Intergalactic, that's a bit of a stretch still, but maybe one day in a few centuries we might crack some technology that could enable us that. Wouldn't that be great? If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.